The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Placitas general store, dust swirling around its wheels like a living thing, and Caroline Reed stepped down onto New Mexico soil carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and a secret that would soon be impossible to hide. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small town, making the air shimmer above the dirt road that served as Placitas's main street. Caroline pressed one hand to her lower back, feeling the dull ache that had settled there during the 3-day journey from Santa Fe. At 22 years old, she had expected her life to look very different by now. She had expected to be married to Thomas, to be setting up a home in Boston, to be planning a nursery with Joy instead of arriving alone in a town where nobody knew her name or her shame. The stagecoach driver handed down her trunk without meeting her eyes. Men always seemed to know, somehow, even when a woman was only 3 months along and barely showing. Or perhaps it was just the fact that she traveled alone, without a husband or even a chaperone, that made them avoid her gaze. "Thank you," she said quietly, but he had already climbed back onto his perch. Caroline looked around the dusty street. A few buildings lined either side, their wooden facades bleached pale by the relentless sun. A saloon, a smithy, the general store, and what looked like a boarding house. In the distance, she could see a small church with a white steeple. Mountains rose in every direction, purple and magnificent against the brilliant blue sky. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, so different from the green hills of her childhood in Virginia, or the civilized streets of Boston where she had lived these past 2 years. A woman in a faded calico dress emerged from the general store, eyeing Caroline with open curiosity. Caroline straightened her shoulders and picked up her carpet bag. She would need to find somewhere to stay, and quickly. Her funds were limited, enough for perhaps a month if she was careful, and then she would need to find work. What work a pregnant, unmarried woman could find in a town this small, she did not know, but she would face that problem when it arose. "Excuse me," Caroline called to the woman. "Could you direct me to the boarding house?" The woman's eyes traveled from Caroline's face to her ringless left hand, and her expression cooled. "We don't have a boarding house no more. Mrs. Patterson died last winter and her son closed it up." She paused. "The saloon has rooms, but they are not suitable for a lady." The emphasis on the last word made it clear what the woman thought about whether Caroline qualified as a lady at all. Caroline felt her cheeks burn but kept her voice level. "I see. Thank you for the information." The woman went back inside without another word, and Caroline stood alone on the street, uncertainty washing over her for the first time since she had made the decision to leave Boston. She had chosen New Mexico because it was far enough away that no one would know her story, and because her mother's cousin had once mentioned living near Placitas. But that had been years ago, and Caroline had no idea if the woman was even still alive, or how to find her. "You look lost." The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet. Caroline turned to find a man standing a few feet away, holding the reins of a large bay horse. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard for their living, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of summer grass. He wore dusty work clothes, a brown vest over a chambray shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. There was something gentle in his expression, despite his weathered appearance, something that made Caroline feel less alone than she had in months. "I am looking for a place to stay," she admitted, too tired to pretend otherwise. "I was told the boarding house is closed." He nodded slowly, his gaze taking her in with the same careful assessment the stagecoach driver had given her, but without the judgment. Has been since February." He paused, seeming to consider something. "Are you passing through or planning to stay? I am planning to stay if I can find somewhere to live and work. The admission felt dangerous, but something about this stranger made her want to be honest. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "My name is Grant Vaughn. I have a ranch about 3 miles outside of town. My sister lives with me, and we could use help. She is not well, and managing the house has become difficult for her." Caroline stared at him, surprise rendering her momentarily speechless. "You are offering me work. You do not even know me." "No, but I know desperation when I see it, and I know loneliness." His eyes were kind. "What is your name, Caroline Reed?" "Well, Miss Reed, I am offering you room and board and a small wage in exchange for helping my sister with the household work. The ranch is not fancy, but it is clean and safe. If that interests you, my wagon is at the smithy getting a wheel fixed. It should be ready within the hour, and you could come out with me then to meet Clara, my sister, and see if the arrangement suits you." It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. Caroline had learned that lesson the hard way with Thomas, who had promised her the world and left her with nothing but a child growing inside her and a ruined reputation. But she also knew that she had few options, and that standing in the street of Placitas with nowhere to go was not one of them. "That is very generous, Mr. Vaughn," she said carefully, "but I should tell you that I am not entirely alone." She took a breath, her hand moving almost unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "I am expecting a child. I am not married. If that changes your offer, I understand." She watched his face, waiting for the warmth to disappear from his eyes for him to make an excuse and walk away. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment, and then he smiled slightly. It transformed his face, making him look younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 26 or 27. "Both of you belong here now," he said simply. "If you want to be here, that is. Clara will be glad of the company and the help, and we do not judge people by their past. Everyone deserves a fresh start, Miss Reed." Caroline felt tears prick at her eyes, the first genuine kindness she had received in 3 months threatening to undo her carefully maintained composure. "Thank you," she whispered. "I would very much like to see your ranch and meet your sister." Grant nodded. "I will get your trunk. Why do not you wait in the shade over there by the smithy? You look like you have been traveling hard, and this sun is not kind to anyone." He picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing and started toward the smithy. Caroline followed, her heart feeling lighter than it had since the morning she had woken up sick and realized what it meant. She did not know this man, did not know what his ranch would be like, or whether his sister would truly welcome her. But for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. The smithy was a large open building, heat pouring out of it in waves. A massive man with arms like tree trunks was hammering at something on the anvil, the ring of metal on metal echoing in the space. Grant set Caroline's trunk down beside a wagon and went to speak with the smithy. Caroline sank onto a bench in the shade, grateful to be off her feet. She watched Grant as he talked with the smithy, noting the easy way he moved, the respectful nods between the two men. He had not flinched when she told him about the baby. He had not looked at her with disgust or pity. He had simply said that both of them belonged, as though it were that simple. As though a woman could arrive pregnant and alone in a strange town and be welcomed without question. Caroline did not believe in fairy tales anymore. Thomas had cured her of that, but she was willing to believe in second chances, and that was what Grant Vaughn seemed to be offering. She would work hard, she promised herself. She would earn her place at his ranch, would help his sister, would prove that his kindness had not been misplaced. And when the baby came, she would figure out what to do. She had 5 months to make a plan, 5 months to save money and prepare. It would have to be enough. Grant returned after a few minutes. "Another half hour," he said. "Are you hungry? The hotel serves meals and the food is decent." Caroline's stomach had been uncertain all morning, but she realized she was indeed hungry. "I do not want to be any trouble." "You are not trouble, Miss Reed. Come on. You need to eat, and so do I." The hotel restaurant was small and dim, a relief after the brightness outside. Grant ordered stew and cornbread for both of them, and coffee that came strong and black. Caroline had not been able to tolerate coffee for weeks, but when she took a cautious sip, her stomach accepted it. The stew, when it arrived, was rich with beef and vegetables, and she ate it slowly, savoring every bite. "How long have you been traveling?" Grant asked. 3 days from Santa Fe. Before that, 2 weeks from Boston. That is a long journey. Yes. She did not elaborate, and he did not press. "Have you done household work before?" Caroline nodded. "I managed my aunt's house in Boston for the past 2 years. Before that, I helped my mother in Virginia." "I can cook, clean, so tend a garden. I am a hard worker, Mr. Vaughn." "I believe you." He broke apart a piece of cornbread. "And please call me Grant. We are not formal out here. Then you should call me Caroline." He smiled again, that same transformation of his face. "Caroline it is." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, and then Grant paid and led her back to the smithy. The wagon wheel had been repaired, and Grant loaded her trunk into the back before helping her up onto the seat. His hand was warm and calloused against hers, strong and steady. He climbed up beside her and took up the reins, and the horses started forward at his gentle command. The road out of Placitas was little more than a dirt track, winding between scrub brush and scattered juniper trees. The mountains seemed to grow larger as they drove, their peaks sharp against the sky. Caroline had never seen landscape like this, so open and vast. In Virginia, trees had enclosed the roads, creating a canopy of green. In Boston, buildings had pressed in on every side. Here, the world seemed to stretch on forever, and Caroline felt simultaneously liberated and terrified by all that space. "It takes some getting used to," Grant said, as though reading her thoughts. "When I first came here 5 years ago, I felt like I might blow away. There was so much sky. Now I cannot imagine living anywhere else." "Where did you come from?" "Colorado originally. Worked cattle ranches up there since I was 14. When Clara got sick, I needed to find a place with milder winters, and a friend told me about land available here in New Mexico territory. Got a good price on the ranch, and we have been here ever since." "What is wrong with your sister, if you do not mind me asking?" Grant's expression grew somber. "Lung fever 3 years ago. She survived it, but she has never been strong since. Gets tired easily, has trouble breathing sometimes. The doctor says the dry air here is better for her than the damp cold up north, and she has improved some, but she will never be fully well again." "I am sorry," Caroline said softly. "She is alive, and for a while we did not think she would be. I am grateful for that." He glanced at her. "She is 20 years old, and she has a good heart. I think you will like each other." 20 years old, just 2 years younger than Caroline. "Does she know you were hiring someone?" "No, but she will be pleased. She tries to do too much, and I worry about her." His hands were easy on the reins, confident. "I should probably tell you that I am not married either, before we get there and you think there is more to the household than there is. It is just Clara and me, and old Miguel who helps with the cattle and the horses. He has a cabin on the property but mostly keeps to himself. An unmarried man and his invalid sister, and now an unmarried pregnant woman." Caroline could imagine what the woman at the general store would say about the arrangement, but she found she did not care. She had left behind the world of social niceties and whispered scandals. She was starting over, and if that meant living on a ranch with people who accepted her, then so be it. The ranch appeared gradually. first as a distant cluster of buildings, then resolving into a neat adobe house with a covered porch, a large barn, several corrals, and a few outbuildings. It was simple but well maintained, with flower boxes under the windows that spoke of a woman's touch. Mountains rose behind the property, close enough to seem protective rather than imposing. Grant pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, and the front door opened immediately. A young woman stepped out onto the porch, one hand braced against the door frame as though she needed the support. She was small and delicate, with the same dark hair as her brother and pale skin that suggested she did not spend much time in the sun. But her smile was bright and genuine as she looked at Caroline. "Grant, you did not say you were bringing a guest." Grant jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Caroline down. "This is Caroline Reed. Caroline, my sister Clara. I have hired Caroline to help around the house." Clara's eyes widened. "You have?" She looked from her brother to Caroline and back again, and then her smile grew even brighter. "Oh, Grant, truly, that is wonderful." She moved forward, but Grant was already there, offering his arm for support. "Careful," he said gently. "I am fine," Clara insisted, but she took his arm anyway. She looked at Caroline with open curiosity but no judgment. "Welcome to our home, Miss Reed. I am so glad you are here. Please call me Caroline." Caroline found herself smiling back, unable to resist Clara's warmth. "I am glad to be here." Grant retrieved her trunk and carried it inside, and Clara led Caroline into the house. The interior was cool and dim, a relief after the heat outside. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all at once, with a fireplace at one end and a sturdy table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Colorful woven blankets hung on the walls, and the windows were covered with simple cotton curtains that moved in the slight breeze. It was clean and homey, the kind of place that immediately felt safe. "I know it is not much," Clara said, a hint of apology in her voice. "It is lovely," Caroline said truthfully. After weeks of hotels and stagecoaches, the quiet domesticity of the space was exactly what she needed. Grant carried the trunk through a doorway off the main room. "I am putting you in here," he called. "It is small, but it has a good bed and a window." Caroline followed him into a bedroom that was indeed small but perfect. A simple bed with a colorful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, a chest of drawers, and a single chair. The window looked out toward the mountains, and the late afternoon light slanted across the wooden floor. "This is wonderful," Caroline said. "Thank you, Grant." He set the trunk at the foot of the bed. "I will let you get settled. Take your time, rest if you need to. We eat supper around 7, nothing fancy." After he left, Caroline sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full weight of relief. She had arrived in Placitas with no plan beyond finding her mother's cousin, and instead she had found this. A room of her own, work to do, people who seemed kind. She pressed her hands to her stomach, barely rounded yet, but soon to swell with undeniable evidence of her situation. "We are safe," she whispered to the child inside her. "We are going to be all right." She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses on pegs behind the door and arranging her brush and pins on the washstand. Everything she owned fit easily into the small space, a stark reminder of how completely her life had changed. 4 months ago, she had lived in a comfortable house in Boston, had worn fine dresses and attended parties, had believed herself to be engaged to a successful merchant. Now she had 2 faded dresses, a few dollars, and a future as uncertain as the New Mexico sky. But she also had this room, this chance, these people who had welcomed her without questions. It was more than she had dared to hope for. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Caroline." "May I come in?" Clara's voice was gentle, of course. Clara entered, moving slowly, and sat in the chair by the window. "I wanted to talk to you before supper," she said. "Grant does not gossip, and I do not either, but I wanted you to know that if you ever want to talk about anything, I am a good listener." Caroline sat back down on the bed, studying the younger woman. There was understanding in Clara's eyes, a kindness that made Caroline's throat tight. "Grant told you," he mentioned, "that you were alone and needed help. That was enough for me to know you have a story, and that it has probably not been an easy one." Clara folded her hands in her lap. "I know what it is like to need help, to feel like a burden. I hate that I cannot do more around here, that Grant has to work so hard because I am not strong enough. So I am glad you are here, truly. Not just because we need the help, but because I think maybe you need us too." Caroline felt the tears she had been holding back since Boston finally spill over. "I am pregnant," she said, the words falling out in a rush. "The father was supposed to marry me, but when I told him about the baby, he said he had changed his mind. He gave me money to go away and never come back. I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to, so I came here. I thought maybe my mother's cousin lived nearby, but I do not even know her married name or how to find her. When Grant offered me this job, it felt like a miracle, but I do not want you to think that I am trying to take advantage of your kindness. I will work hard, I promise. I will earn my place here." Clara reached across the space between them and took Caroline's hand. "You do not have to earn anything," she said firmly. "You are here because Grant saw someone who needed help, and because I am grateful to have another woman in the house. You are here because you belong here, Caroline. Both of you do." She squeezed Caroline's hand. "And that man who turned his back on you is a fool. You and your baby are better off without him." Caroline laughed through her tears. "Thank you. I have not had anyone to talk to about this. I have felt so alone." "You are not alone anymore." Clara stood, moving carefully. "Now let me show you around the kitchen so you can help with supper. I was going to make biscuits and fried chicken if that sounds good to you." "It sounds perfect." They worked together in the kitchen, Clara directing and Caroline doing the physical work. It felt good to be useful again, to have a task to focus on. Clara was easy to talk to, chattering about the ranch and the animals and life in New Mexico. She did not press Caroline for more details about her past, and Caroline was grateful for that. There would be time later when they knew each other better, to share the full story. Grant came in as the sun was setting, having washed up at the pump outside. His hair was damp, and he had changed into a clean shirt. He looked younger in the golden light, and when he smiled at the sight of Caroline and Clara working together in the kitchen, Caroline felt her heart do a strange little skip. She pushed the feeling away immediately. She was pregnant with another man's child, barely settled in this new place. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for her employer, no matter how kind his eyes or how gentle his manner. She was here to work, to make a life for herself and her baby, not to indulge in foolish romantic notions. But as they sat down to supper together, passing plates of chicken and biscuits and green beans from the garden, Caroline could not help but notice the way Grant looked at his sister with such obvious affection, or the way he thanked Caroline for her help with a sincerity that made her feel valued. She noticed the way he ate the food she had cooked with appreciation, and the way he asked her about her journey west with genuine interest. After supper, Grant insisted on doing the dishes while Caroline and Clara sat on the porch in the cooling evening air. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple, the mountains going dark against the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and Caroline shivered despite the warmth. "You will get used to the sounds," Clara said. "At first the quiet frightened me more than anything. Coming from Denver, where there was always noise, the silence here felt overwhelming. But now I love it. I love being able to hear the wind and the animals and the sound of my own thoughts. How long have you been here? 5 years in September. Grant brought me here when I was 15, after our parents died and I got sick. He gave up everything to take care of me. There was guilt in Clara's voice. He should be married by now, should have his own family. Instead, he is stuck here with me. He does not seem to think of it as being stuck, Caroline said gently. He seems to think of it as taking care of someone he loves. He is too good, Clara said. Sometimes I worry that he is so busy taking care of me that he is forgetting to live his own life. Caroline did not know what to say to that, so she simply sat with Clara in the gathering darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the New Mexico night. When Grant came out to tell them he was going to check on the animals before bed, Caroline stood to go inside, suddenly exhausted from the long day. "Thank you again," she said to both of them, "for everything." "You are welcome," Grant said. "Sleep well, Caroline." In her small room, Caroline changed into her nightgown and lay down on the surprisingly comfortable bed. Through the window, she could see stars appearing in the darkening sky, more stars than she had ever seen in her life. She thought about Thomas, about the life in Boston she had left behind, but the pain felt distant now, muffled by exhaustion and the strange new hope blooming in her chest. She thought about Grant's words. "Both of you belong here now." Such simple words, but they had changed everything. For the first time since discovering she was pregnant, Caroline felt like maybe things would be all right. Maybe she could build a life here, in this harsh and beautiful place. Maybe she and her child would find their place in the world after all. Caroline woke the next morning to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was, but then memory returned and she sat up carefully. Her stomach felt uncertain, the familiar morning sickness that had plagued her for weeks, but it was mild today. She dressed quickly in one of her work dresses and pinned up her hair, then ventured out into the main room. Grant was already gone, but Clara sat at the table with a cup of tea, looking pale but cheerful. "Good morning," Clara said. "Coffee is on the stove if you want it, though I cannot tolerate it myself anymore." Grant was up early to move the cattle to the north pasture. He will be back around mid-morning. Caroline poured herself coffee and sat across from Clara. "What can I do to help today?" "Well, it is wash day, which I confess I have been dreading. I have been letting things pile up because I just do not have the energy for it. If you would not mind doing the laundry, I would be forever grateful. Of course. Just show me where everything is." They spent the morning working together, Caroline hauling water and scrubbing clothes while Clara sat in the shade and hung things to dry. It was hard physical work, but Caroline was glad of it. She needed to stay active, needed to feel useful. And it gave her time to think, to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Grant returned as promised, dusty and tired but smiling when he saw the laundry flapping in the breeze. "You two have been busy." "Caroline did all the work," Clara said. "I just supervised." "Important job," Grant said solemnly, but his eyes were twinkling. He looked at Caroline. "Thank you. I know it is hard work." "I do not mind," Caroline said, and realized it was true. There was something satisfying about seeing the clean laundry, about knowing she had accomplished something tangible. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Caroline woke early and made breakfast while Grant did the morning chores. They ate together, the three of them, and then Grant would go out to work the ranch while Caroline and Clara managed the house. Caroline cooked and cleaned and did the heavy work that Clara could not manage, while Clara planned meals and mended clothes and kept Caroline company. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit on the porch and talk. Grant told stories about his work, about the cattle and the horses and old Miguel, who Caroline had glimpsed from a distance but not yet met. Clara talked about her childhood in Colorado, about their parents who had died in a fire, about Grant's determination to save enough money to buy the ranch. And gradually, Caroline began to share her own story. She told them about growing up in Virginia, about her mother dying when she was 18 and going to live with her aunt in Boston, about meeting Thomas at a party, about believing his promises of love and marriage, about the night she had given in to his persuasions, trusting that they would be married soon, about discovering she was pregnant and watching his face change from charm to cold calculation as he gave her money and told her to disappear. "I should have known better," Caroline said one evening, 3 weeks after her arrival. "My mother always said that men who made promises too easily rarely kept them, but I wanted so badly to believe him. I wanted to believe that someone loved me." Grant, who had been whittling a piece of wood, set down his knife. "He is the one who should have known better," he said quietly. "A man who would abandon a woman carrying his child is no man at all." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Caroline's heart skip again, that same strange flutter she had felt the first night. She was 4 months pregnant now, and her belly was starting to show in a way she could no longer hide. She had let out her dresses as much as she could, but soon she would need new clothes. Clara had already started sewing her a loose-fitting dress that would accommodate her growing belly, working on it in the afternoons when Caroline thought she was resting. "I brought this on myself," Caroline said, because she had been taught to believe that, had heard it whispered behind hands in Boston. "No," Clara said firmly. "He brought this on you. He made promises and broke them. That is not your fault." Grant nodded his agreement but did not say more, returning to his whittling. Caroline watched his hands move sure and steady and wondered what he was thinking. He had been nothing but kind to her since her arrival, but always at a careful distance. He did not touch her unless necessary, did not press her with questions, did not treat her with anything but respect. Sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, but he always looked away when she noticed. It was better this way, she told herself. She did not need complications. She needed stability and safety, and that was what Grant and Clara were giving her. If sometimes she found herself thinking about the way Grant's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the sound of his laugh, or the strength in his hands, well, that was natural enough. He was a good man, and she had not known many of those, but she could not let herself imagine more than what they had. She was an employee, a charity case, a pregnant woman alone in the world. Grant deserved better than that. He deserved a woman who could come to him whole, who did not carry another man's child. The kindest thing she could do was keep her growing feelings to herself and be grateful for the home he had given her. August turned to September, and the heat began to ease slightly. Caroline's belly grew round and undeniable, and she felt the baby move for the first time one afternoon while kneading bread. She had stopped, her hands going still in the dough, her eyes widening at the strange flutter inside her. "What is wrong?" Clara asked, looking up from her sewing. "The baby just moved," Caroline whispered. "I felt it move." Clara's face broke into a delighted smile. "Oh, Caroline, that is wonderful!" Caroline started to cry, overwhelmed by the reality of it all. There was a baby inside her, a real living baby that moved and grew. She was going to be a mother. The weight of that responsibility, the joy and terror of it, crashed over her all at once. Clara came to her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It is going to be all right," she said gently. "You are not alone. We are going to help you through this." "I am so scared," Caroline admitted. "I do not know how to be a mother. I do not know what I am doing." "None of us do, not until we do it," Clara said. "But you are strong, Caroline. Look at everything you have already survived. You will survive this too, and you will be a wonderful mother." That evening, Caroline told Grant about feeling the baby move. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sun set as had become their habit. When she mentioned it, he turned to look at her, his expression soft. "That must have been amazing," he said. "It was terrifying," Caroline said honestly, "but also wonderful. It makes it all feel so real." "It is real," Grant said. "In a few months there will be a baby here and this house will be full of new life." He paused. "I have been thinking, Caroline, when the baby comes you will need help. Clara is willing, but she cannot do much physically. I was thinking maybe we could hire someone from town to come out for a few weeks after the birth to help you get settled." Caroline stared at him. "Grant, you have already done so much. I cannot ask you to spend money on that." "You are not asking, I am offering." He met her eyes. "You are part of this household now, Caroline. Your baby will be part of it too. We take care of our own." Tears sprang to Caroline's eyes yet again. She seemed to cry at everything these days, her emotions so close to the surface. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me." Grant's voice was quiet but intense. "You work hard, you have brought joy back into this house, you have been a good friend to Clara. That is thanks enough." He stood then, as though embarrassed by his own words, and went inside. Caroline sat alone in the gathering darkness, her hands pressed to her belly, feeling the baby move again under her palms. She thought about Grant's words, about being part of the household, about taking care of their own. When had this become home? When had these people become her family? She could not pinpoint a single moment, but somewhere in the past few months it had happened. She belonged here now, just as Grant had said that first day. And more than that, she wanted to belong here. She wanted to watch her child grow up on this ranch, wanted to sit on this porch for years to come, wanted to be part of Grant and Clara's lives. And if she was honest with herself, she wanted more than that. She wanted the way Grant looked at her to mean what she thought it meant. She wanted the careful distance he maintained to be because he was holding himself back, not because he did not care. She wanted things that she had no right to want, things that her situation made impossible, but wanting them did not make them go away. October brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of color in the trees along the creek that ran through the property. Caroline was 5 months pregnant now, her belly round and prominent, the baby active and strong. She had good days and difficult ones. Days when she felt energetic and capable, and days when exhaustion weighed her down like a physical thing. Grant had become increasingly protective as her pregnancy advanced, insisting she not lift heavy things, not work too long in the heat, not push herself too hard. It was sweet, but also frustrating, because Caroline did not want to be a burden. She wanted to earn her keep, wanted to prove that hiring her had been worthwhile. "You are being ridiculous," Clara said one afternoon when Caroline tried to carry a heavy basket of vegetables from the garden. "Grant is right. You need to rest more." "I need to work," Caroline insisted. "That is why I am here." "No, you are here because you needed a home and we needed a friend." Clara took the basket from her. "Now sit down before you fall down. You are pale as milk." Caroline sat, feeling the baby kick vigorously as though in protest at all the activity. She rubbed her belly absently, watching Clara struggle with the basket. "Let me help you." "Absolutely not. I can manage this much." Clara made it to the porch steps and set the basket down, breathing hard from the effort. See, still capable. They both knew it was not true, not really. Clara's health had been declining over the past month, her breathing more labored, her energy even more limited than usual. Grant had sent for the doctor from Santa Fe, who had come and examined Clara and shaken his head. There was nothing more to be done, he said. Keep her comfortable, keep her rested, and hope for the best. Grant had been quieter since then, the worry etched deep in his face. Caroline wanted to comfort him but did not know how. She was not his wife, not even really his friend. She was an employee, someone he had helped out of kindness. She had no right to offer him the kind of comfort he needed. But one evening in late October, after Clara had gone to bed early, Caroline found Grant sitting on the porch steps in the dark, his head in his hands. She almost turned back inside, not wanting to intrude, but something in the slump of his shoulders stopped her. "Grant," she said softly. "Are you all right?" He looked up, and even in the dim light from the window, she could see the tracks of tears on his face. "I am sorry," he said, wiping at his eyes. "I did not mean for you to see me like this. You do not have to apologize." Caroline sat down beside him, not too close but near enough that he would know she was there. "Is it Clara? I am going to lose her," Grant said, his voice breaking. "The doctor said maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but I am going to lose her and there is nothing I can do to stop it." Caroline's heart broke for him. "I am so sorry." "She is all I have left," Grant said. "Our parents are gone, we have no other family. When she dies, I will be completely alone." "No, you will not," Caroline said before she could stop herself. "You will have me and the baby, if you want us, that is. I know we are not real family, but we are here, Grant. We are not going anywhere." Grant turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face in the darkness. "Why would you stay?" he asked. "When Clara is gone, you will not need to be here anymore. You could find somewhere else, somewhere better." "There is nowhere better," Caroline said firmly. "This is my home. You and Clara have become my family. I do not want to be anywhere else." "Caroline." Her name on his lips was almost a plea. "I need to tell you something, and I do not know how to say it without it sounding like I am taking advantage of the situation." "Then just say it," Caroline whispered. Grant took a breath. "I care about you." "More than I should. More than is probably appropriate given your condition and the fact that you work for me. But I care about you, Caroline. I have cared about you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach looking lost and brave all at once. And I know I have no right to say that, not when you are carrying another man's child, not when you came here looking for safety and not for romance. But I wanted you to know, because if something happens to Clara, I do not want you to think you have to leave. I want you to stay. I want you and the baby to stay, and I want to help you raise this child as though it were my own." Caroline could barely breathe. "Grant, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know." He stood up, clearly intending to go inside to give her space to process his words. "Wait," Caroline said, standing too. "Grant, wait." He turned back to her and she stepped closer, close enough to see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I care about you too," she said. "I have been trying not to, trying to convince myself that it would be inappropriate and foolish, that you were just being kind. But I care about you, Grant. I think I have been falling in love with you for months now, and I did not know how to tell you because of this." She gestured to her pregnant belly. "Because of the baby, because of my past, because of everything." "The baby does not matter to me," Grant said fiercely. "Your past does not matter to me. All that matters is who you are now, who you are choosing to be. And that is someone brave and strong and kind, someone who works hard and loves deeply, someone who makes every day better just by being in it." "Grant," Caroline whispered, and then he was stepping closer, his hands coming up to frame her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she did not know she had shed. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and sure, and Caroline felt like she was coming home. The kiss was sweet and tender, nothing demanding or presumptuous, just a promise of feelings shared and a future possible. When they broke apart, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, want to give you time to be sure. I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated." "I feel neither of those things," Caroline said. "I feel grateful and happy and more hopeful than I have in a very long time." They sat back down on the porch steps together, and this time Caroline let herself lean against Grant's solid warmth. He put his arm around her shoulders, careful of her belly, and they sat in the peaceful darkness, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. "What will Clara say?" Caroline asked eventually. Grant laughed softly. "She will be insufferably pleased with herself. She has been telling me for weeks that I should tell you how I felt." "She has known." "Clara always knows everything," Grant said. "She is observant like that." Caroline smiled, imagining Clara's reaction. "She will think she arranged the whole thing." "She probably did in her way." Grant pressed a kiss to the top of Caroline's head, "But I am grateful for it, however it happened." They stayed there until Caroline began to yawn, the baby's movements slowing as it settled for the night. Grant walked her to her bedroom door, kissed her gently once more, and bid her good night. Caroline lay in bed afterward, her hands on her belly, feeling a joy so profound it was almost frightening. She was going to have a baby, and she was falling in love with a good man who wanted to raise that baby as his own. She had a home and a family, and a future that looked nothing like what she had planned, but so much better than she had dared to hope for. Life had taken everything from her in Boston, but it had given her this instead, and she would not trade it for anything. Clara's reaction the next morning was exactly as predicted. When Caroline came out for breakfast and Clara saw the way she and Grant looked at each other, she clapped her hands together in delight despite her obvious exhaustion. "Finally," she exclaimed. "I thought you two would never figure it out." "You are far too pleased with yourself," Grant said, but he was smiling. "I have every right to be pleased. I am going to have a niece or nephew soon, and my brother has finally found someone who makes him happy. This is the best news I have had in months." Caroline hugged Clara carefully. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thank you for making my brother smile again," Clara whispered back. The next weeks were bittersweet. Grant and Caroline courted each other in small, sweet ways. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. She made his favorite meals. They sat together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. Grant talked about his hopes for the ranch, about wanting to raise good horses in addition to cattle, about building onto the house someday. Caroline talked about wanting to learn to ride, about teaching her child to love the land the way she was learning to love it, about building a life that mattered. But always, there was Clara's declining health casting a shadow over their happiness. She grew weaker as October turned to November, spending more time in bed, her breathing labored and painful to hear. Grant hired a woman from town to come and help with the heavier nursing tasks, and Caroline spent hours sitting with Clara, reading to her or just holding her hand. "I am glad he has you," Clara said one afternoon, her voice thin. "I have been so worried about leaving him alone." "Do not talk like that," Caroline said, even though they both knew the truth. "I need to," Clara said. "Please, Caroline, I need to know that you will take care of him. He acts so strong, but he hurts deeply. When I am gone, he will need you." "I promise," Caroline said through her tears. "I promise I will take care of him. And he will take care of you and the baby. That is what he wants, you know, to be a father, to have a family. He is going to be so good at it. I know." Clara squeezed her hand weakly. "Be happy, Caroline. Both of you deserve to be happy." A week later, on a cold November morning, Clara died peacefully in her sleep. Grant found her when he went to check on her, and his anguished cry brought Caroline running. She held him as he sobbed, this strong man who had lost his last family member, and promised him through her own tears that he was not alone, would never be alone again. They buried Clara on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree that blazed gold in the autumn light. The priest from Placitas came to say the words, and a surprising number of townspeople showed up to pay their respects. Miguel carved a beautiful wooden cross to mark the grave, and Grant stood with his arm around Caroline, his face drawn with grief but his shoulders straight. Afterward, back at the house that felt too empty without Clara's presence, Grant and Caroline sat together in the growing darkness. Caroline was 6 months pregnant now, the baby active and demanding, a constant reminder of the life continuing even in the midst of death. "She loved you," Caroline said softly. "She was so happy that we found each other." "I know." Grant's voice was rough. "She told me the day before she died that she could go peacefully knowing I would not be alone." "You will never be alone," Caroline promised again. "I am here, Grant. I am not going anywhere." Grant turned to look at her, his green eyes dark with grief but also something else, something that looked like hope. "Marry me," he said abruptly. "I know the timing is not ideal. I know you are still months away from having the baby, but I want to make it official. I want you to be my wife. I want this baby to have my name. I want us to be a real family." Caroline's heart soared even as tears streamed down her face. "Are you sure? You do not have to do this out of obligation or grief or anything else. I will stay regardless." "I am not asking out of obligation," Grant said firmly. He took her hands in his. "I am asking because I love you, Caroline Reed. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you laugh and the way you think, and the way you made my sister smile even when she was dying. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Caroline said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Grant, I will marry me. I love you too so much." He kissed her then, deep and sure, a kiss full of promise and hope and love. When they broke apart, he pressed his hand gently to her belly, and the baby kicked as though in approval. "Did you feel that?" Caroline asked. "I felt it." Grant's smile was the first genuine one she had seen since Clara's death. "Hello, little one. I am going to be your father if that is all right with you." Another kick, stronger this time, and Caroline laughed. "I think that is a yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Placitas, with just the priest and Miguel as witnesses. Caroline wore a simple blue dress that Clara had finished making just days before her death, letting out the seams to accommodate Caroline's pregnant belly. Grant wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and so full of love that Caroline thought her heart might burst from happiness. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Grant kissed her with a tenderness that made her feel precious and cherished. Walking back down the aisle as Mrs. Grant Vaughn, Caroline felt like she was stepping into a new life, one she had never imagined but one that felt absolutely right. They returned to the ranch that was now truly their home, and Grant carried her over the threshold despite her protests about her weight. He set her down gently in the main room and looked around at the space they would share. "It needs work," he said. "I want to add more rooms, make a proper nursery for the baby. And in the spring, I want to plant a bigger garden, maybe add a chicken coop so you can have fresh eggs." "It is perfect exactly as it is," Caroline said, but she was smiling at his plans, at the future he was building for them. That night, for the first time, Caroline slept in Grant's bed instead of her own small room. He held her carefully, mindful of her belly, and whispered his love and his promises into her hair. Caroline felt safe and cherished in a way she never had before, not even in those early days with Thomas when she had believed his lies. This was what real love felt like, she realized. It was not grand promises or flowery words. It was Grant's careful hands and quiet strength. It was the way he had welcomed her when she had nowhere else to go, the way he had accepted her baby as his own, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. December brought cold winds and occasional snow, beautiful and strange to Caroline, who had never seen snow fall on desert mountains. Her belly grew enormous, the baby running out of room and making its presence known with constant movement. She was uncomfortable and tired, her back aching and her sleep disrupted, but she was also deeply content. Grant fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more, bringing her pillows and blankets, rubbing her feet in the evenings when they swelled. He talked to her belly, telling the baby stories about the ranch and about Clara, making sure his child would know about the aunt who had loved them before they were even born. On a cold afternoon in mid-January, Caroline felt the first real pain, different from the practice contractions she had been having for weeks. She was folding laundry when it hit, a tightening across her belly that took her breath away. Grant was in the barn, but Miguel saw her from where he was mending fence and came running. "Senora Vaughn, are you all right? I think the baby is coming," Caroline managed. "Can you get Grant?" Miguel ran for the barn, and moments later Grant came sprinting across the yard, his face pale. "Caroline, is it time?" "I think so." Another pain gripped her, stronger this time. Grant helped her to the bedroom they now shared and sent Miguel racing to town for the midwife they had arranged to hire. The woman, Mrs. Chen, arrived within 2 hours, her capable hands and calm demeanor immediately reassuring. She examined Caroline and nodded. "You have a while yet," she said. "First babies take their time. Try to rest between the pains." The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, long and difficult and exhausting. Grant stayed by Caroline's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she thought she could not go on. "You can do this," he kept saying. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." And finally, as the sun rose on a cold January morning, their baby entered the world with a lusty cry that made Caroline laugh through her tears of exhaustion and relief. "It is a boy, Mrs. Chen announced, placing the squalling infant on Caroline's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Caroline looked down at her son, his face red and scrunched, his tiny fists waving, and fell completely in love. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "Hello, my beautiful boy." Grant was crying openly, his hand gently touching the baby's head. "He is perfect," he said. "Caroline, he is absolutely perfect." "Do you have a name picked out?" Mrs. Chen asked as she worked. Caroline looked at Grant. They had discussed names but never settled on one. "What do you think?" she asked. Grant looked at the baby, then out the window toward the hillside where Clara was buried. "What about Clayton?" he suggested. "For Clara." "Clayton Vaughn," Caroline said, testing the name. "I love it. Clayton Grant Vaughn." "Clayton Grant Vaughn," Grant repeated, his voice full of wonder. He leaned down and kissed Caroline's forehead. "Thank you. Thank you for him, for this, for everything." "Thank you for saying both of us belong here," Caroline said, remembering that first day in Placitas. "Thank you for giving us a home. This will always be your home," Grant promised. "Both of you." The first weeks with Clayton were exhausting but joyful. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he thrived under the combined attention of his parents. Grant was a natural father, patient and gentle, changing diapers and walking the floor at night without complaint. He sang to Clayton in a surprisingly good voice, taught him to recognize the sounds of the ranch, held him for hours while Caroline rested. Miguel carved a beautiful cradle for the baby, and the townspeople who had been standoffish when Caroline first arrived brought gifts and congratulations now that she was respectably married. Mrs. Chen visited regularly to check on Clayton and pronounced him thriving. As winter eased into spring, Caroline felt herself settling fully into this life. She was a wife and a mother, roles she had never imagined playing in quite this way. She had thought motherhood would come with shame and struggle, that she would face it alone and afraid. Instead, she faced it with a husband who loved her and a community that had accepted her. Grant was true to his word about expanding the ranch. As soon as the weather permitted, he began work on adding rooms to the house, building a proper nursery for Clayton and another bedroom for future children. He planted the bigger garden he had promised, and Caroline spent happy hours working in it while Clayton slept in a basket in the shade. They visited Clara's grave often, bringing wildflowers in the spring and telling her about Clayton's milestones. Grant would stand with his hand on the wooden cross and talk to his sister, and Caroline knew he was healing slowly from his grief. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with Clayton sleeping between them, Grant turned to Caroline with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about what we want for our family." "What have you been thinking?" Caroline asked, her hand resting on Clayton's small back, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. "I want more children," Grant said. "If you do, that is. I want this house full of life and laughter. I want Clayton to have brothers and sisters." Caroline smiled. "I want that too. I want everything with you, Grant." "You have it," he promised. "Everything I have, everything I am, it is yours and Clayton's." "We are so lucky to have you," Caroline said. Grant shook his head. "I am the lucky one. The day you stepped off that stagecoach was the luckiest day of my life, even if I did not know it then." "I knew I was desperate," Caroline said. "I knew I had nowhere to go and no idea what I was going to do. And then there you were, offering me hope when I had none." "Both of you belong here now," Grant said, echoing his words from that first day. "And you always will." Clayton stirred in his sleep, his small hand reaching out and grasping Grant's finger with surprising strength. Grant looked down at his son with such love that Caroline felt her eyes fill with tears. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much, Grant Vaughn. I love you too, Caroline Vaughn." He leaned over Clayton to kiss her, gentle and sweet. Now and always. The summer passed in a blur of work and joy. Caroline learned to ride, bouncing around the ranch on a gentle mare that Grant had chosen specifically for her. She would ride out with Clayton secured in a sling against her chest, showing him the land that would be his inheritance. Grant taught her about the cattle and the horses, about the rhythms of ranch life, about the harsh beauty of New Mexico. In the fall, when Clayton was 9 months old and crawling everywhere, Caroline realized she was pregnant again. She told Grant one evening after Clayton was in bed and his face lit up with pure happiness. "Already," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Already," she confirmed. "Are you happy?" "I am thrilled," he said, his hand moving to her still flat stomach. "Another baby. Caroline, we are going to have another baby." This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Caroline was not facing it alone and afraid. She was healthy and happy, and her body seemed to know what to do this time. Grant was even more protective than before, insisting she rest and refusing to let her do anything he considered too strenuous. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Caroline protested one afternoon when he took a basket of vegetables from her hands. "I know, but I like taking care of you," Grant said, unrepentant. "Let me enjoy it." Their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose after both Clara and Caroline's mother, was born on a warm May morning, her birth quick and uncomplicated compared to Clayton's. She had Grant's green eyes and Caroline's dark hair, and both her parents fell immediately in love. "She is beautiful," Grant whispered, cradling her tiny body with practiced ease. "Look at her, Caroline. She is perfect." Caroline watched her husband with their daughter and their son, who was toddling around the room demanding to see his baby sister, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was her family. This was her life. And it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. The years that followed were full and rich. Caroline and Grant had 2 more children, another boy they named Gabriel, and then another girl they named Cecilia. The house that Grant had expanded rang with children's laughter and the sounds of family life. Miguel became a beloved uncle figure to the children, teaching them Spanish and carving them toys. The ranch prospered under Grant's careful management, and they were able to hire additional help, giving them more time to spend with their growing family. Caroline sometimes thought about Thomas, about the life she might have had if he had kept his promises. But she could never regret the path that had led her here, to Grant and this family and this life. She had arrived in Placitas pregnant and alone, desperate and afraid, and she had found everything she needed. Grant was the love she had not known existed, steady and true and deep. He was a wonderful father, patient and playful and endlessly devoted to his children. He built them a swing in the big cottonwood tree near the house, taught them to ride and rope and care for the animals, read them stories every night before bed. He loved Caroline with a consistency that never wavered, through the exhausting years of babies and toddlers, through the challenges of ranch life, through everything. And Caroline loved him back with her whole heart. She made their house a home, filling it with warmth and good food and laughter. She raised their children with love and discipline, teaching them about the world and about kindness. She worked alongside Grant when needed, managed the household, and created a life that felt like a daily blessing. On their 10th anniversary, Grant surprised her with a trip to Santa Fe, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen and Miguel for 2 whole days. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate in restaurants, walked through the plaza like a courting couple. On their last evening, as they watched the sunset from their hotel room window, Grant pulled Caroline into his arms. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me, staying here this life?" Caroline turned in his embrace to look up at him. "Never, not for a single moment. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know enough to want it. You and our children, this life we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I think about that day you arrived," Grant said. "How close I came to not going to town that day, how easily we might have missed each other completely. It terrifies me sometimes, thinking about how different everything could have been." "But we did not miss each other," Caroline said. "You were there, and you offered me hope when I needed it most. You said both of us belong, and you changed my life with those words." "You changed mine too," Grant said. "You brought light and love into a house that had seen too much sadness. You gave me a family and a future. I love you, Caroline. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Caroline whispered, and he kissed her as the New Mexico sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They returned to the ranch to find their children healthy and happy, full of stories about their adventures with Uncle Miguel. Clayton, now 10 years old and already showing signs of becoming as tall as his father, had helped with the cattle. Catherine, at 8, had learned a new song. Gabriel, 6, had found a bird's nest. And Cecilia, just 4, had picked wildflowers for her mother. Caroline gathered them all close, breathing in the smell of sunshine and childhood, feeling Grant's solid presence beside her. This was her life now. This was her family. And every single day, she thanked God for the path that had led her here, for the cowboy who had looked at a pregnant, desperate woman and seen someone worth saving, someone who belonged. The children grew and thrived. Clayton became his father's right hand on the ranch, a natural with horses and cattle. Catherine developed a love of learning, reading every book she could get her hands on and talking about becoming a teacher. Gabriel was the ranch's animal lover, nursing injured creatures back to health and collecting pets. Cecilia was the artist, always drawing or singing or making up elaborate stories. And through it all, Caroline and Grant's love deepened and grew. They faced the challenges of ranch life together, the droughts and the harsh winters, the injured animals and the difficult harvests. They raised their children with love and faith, teaching them to work hard and be kind and appreciate the beauty of the world around them. On quiet evenings when the children were in bed, they would sit on the porch as they had from the beginning, watching the stars come out over the mountains. Sometimes they would talk about the day, about the children, about plans for the future. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, just being together. "You remember when Clara used to sit out here with us?" Caroline asked one evening. "I think about her often," Grant said. "I wish she could have known all the children, could have seen what our life became." "She knew," Caroline said with certainty. "She knew before we did that we would build something beautiful together. That is why she was so happy when we finally admitted how we felt." Grant smiled at the memory. "She was never subtle about her matchmaking. No, she was not. But I am grateful for it." Caroline leaned her head on Grant's shoulder. "I am grateful for all of it, every moment that led us here." "Even the hard parts?" Grant asked gently, because they both knew she meant her time with Thomas, the pregnancy that had brought her west. "Even those," Caroline said, "because they brought me Clayton and they brought me to you. I would not change anything, Grant, not if it meant losing this." He kissed her temple. "Nor would I." As the years continued to pass, the Vaughn Ranch became a landmark in the area, known for quality horses and honest dealing. Grant's reputation as a fair man and a good neighbor grew, and people came to him for advice and help. Caroline became known for her kindness, for the way she always had food for hungry travelers and medicine for the sick. Their home was a place of welcome and warmth, and their children grew up knowing they were loved and valued. When Clayton turned 18, he told his parents he wanted to stay and work the ranch with his father rather than going to college. Grant's pride was evident, but he made sure his son understood what he was choosing. "It is a hard life," he said. "Good, but hard." "Are you sure this is what you want?" "It is all I have ever wanted," Clayton said. "This land, this life, working alongside you, I cannot imagine anything else." Grant clasped his son's shoulder. "Then we will do it together. Partners." Caroline watched them, her firstborn and her husband, and felt a fierce pride and love. Clayton had grown into a fine young man, strong and honest and kind. She thought about the fear she had felt when she was carrying him, the uncertainty about what kind of life she could give him. And here he was, choosing this life, this ranch, this legacy. Catherine did become a teacher, opening a small school in Placitas and teaching the children of the area. She married a kind young man from Santa Fe, a doctor, and they built a house in town but visited the ranch often. Gabriel stayed on the ranch as well, managing the animals and developing a reputation as someone who could gentle even the wildest horse. Cecilia's artistic talents led her to study art in Santa Fe, though she always came home for long visits, filling the house with her laughter and her paintings. And through it all, through the weddings and the grandchildren that eventually came, through the joys and sorrows and ordinary days of life, Caroline and Grant's love remained the foundation of it all. They had started as two broken people finding each other in desperate circumstances, but they had built something lasting and true. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting half the county to the ranch. There was music and dancing and more food than Caroline had ever seen in one place. Grant whirled her around the makeshift dance floor, both of them laughing and breathless, and Caroline felt like a girl again, young and in love and full of hope. 25 years, Grant marveled as the party wound down and they found themselves alone on the porch again, their favorite spot. 25 years since I married the bravest woman I ever met. 25 years since I married the kindest man in the world, Caroline countered. The man who looked at me and my unborn baby and said we belonged. You did belong. You do belong. Always. Grant took her hands in his. Caroline Vaughn, you have made every day of these 25 years better than the one before. You have given me children and a home and a love I never thought I would find. You have made me happier than I ever imagined being. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Caroline was crying happy tears that she made no effort to hide. I love you, Grant. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me a home when I had none, a family when I was alone, a love that has sustained me through everything. You are my heart, my home, my everything. They kissed as their children and grandchildren watched from the windows, the sunset painting the sky in brilliant colors behind them, the mountains standing eternal watch over the land they loved. Years continued to pass, as they always do. Grant's hair turned silver, and Caroline's face gained the lines of a life well lived. Their children had children of their own, and the ranch was passed to Clayton, who ran it with the same integrity his father had shown. Grant and Caroline moved into a smaller house on the property, one Grant built with windows facing Clara's grave and the mountains beyond. They spent their days quietly, tending a garden, visiting with grandchildren, sitting on the porch and remembering. Grant's hands grew gnarled with age and hard work, but they were still gentle when they held Caroline's. Her hair turned white, but her smile was still the one that had made Grant's heart skip that first day. On a warm June evening, 42 years after Caroline had stepped off that stagecoach in Placitas, she and Grant sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. They were both in their 60s now, slowed by age but not diminished. Grant held Caroline's hand, his thumb tracing the wedding band he had placed there so many years before. "Do you remember that first sunset we watched together?" Caroline asked. "When you told me both of us belonged." "I remember everything," Grant said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even exhausted and dusty from travel. I remember wanting to protect you, to give you a safe place to land. You gave me so much more than that," Caroline said. "You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You loved my son as your own from the moment he was born. You built this family with me, this life, this love. It was the easiest thing I ever did," Grant said. "Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life, Caroline Vaughn." She leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting against him as perfectly as she always had. "And loving you has been mine." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, the first stars beginning to appear. Around them, the ranch hummed with the sounds of evening, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the corral, the voices of their grandchildren playing before bedtime. "We built something good here," Grant said softly. "We did," Caroline agreed. "We built something that will last, something that will go on long after we are gone. Our children and their children, all carrying forward what we started." "All because you were brave enough to start over," Grant said. "All because you stepped off that stagecoach and into a new life." "All because you were kind enough to offer me one," Caroline corrected. "All because you saw me and did not turn away." Grant lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I could never have turned away from you. From the first moment, you were mine and I was yours. I just had to wait for you to realize it." Caroline smiled. "Well, I am a bit slow sometimes," he laughed, the sound warm and full of affection. "You are perfect exactly as you are." They watched the last of the light fade from the sky, the stars growing brighter overhead. In the house behind them, they could hear Catherine putting grandchildren to bed, could hear Clayton and Gabriel discussing the next day's work, could hear Cecilia's laugh as she told her nieces and nephews a story. This was their legacy, Caroline thought. Not just the land or the ranch or the horses, but this family, this love, this connection that would ripple forward through generations. She had arrived in Placitas pregnant and alone, desperate and afraid, and she had found not just a home but a purpose, not just a husband but a soulmate, not just survival but a life rich with meaning and joy. "Thank you," she whispered to Grant. "For what?" he asked. "For everything. For all of it, for every moment of these 42 years. Grant pulled her closer. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for staying. Thank you for building this life with me." "I would do it all again," Caroline said. "Every moment, every choice, every step that led me to you. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I," Grant said. "1,000 times over, I would choose you." They sat together under the New Mexico stars, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had weathered every storm. Around them, their family thrived, the ranch prospered, and the land they loved stretched out in every direction. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, and they had created something beautiful and lasting. As the night deepened and the air grew cool, Grant helped Caroline to her feet and they went inside together, hand in hand as always. Behind them, the porch was empty, but it would not be for long. Tomorrow evening they would be back, watching another sunset, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. And in the distance, on a hillside overlooking the ranch, Clara's grave stood silent watch, the wooden cross weathered but still strong. If she could have seen what her brother and Caroline had built together, she would have been so proud. She would have been so happy to know that her last act of matchmaking had resulted in this. A love that lasted a lifetime, a family that spanned generations, and a home where everyone knew they belonged. The story that had started with Caroline arriving pregnant and alone, with Grant saying both of them belonged, had become a story of enduring love and family and hope. It was a story that would be told and retold by their children and grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the hardest moments lead to the greatest blessings, and that love, when it is real and true, can transform everything. And so they lived, Grant and Caroline Vaughn, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured, on the ranch in New Mexico where it had all begun. They lived fully and loved completely, right up until their final days, which came peacefully, many years later, as they slept side by side in the home they had built together. Their children buried them on the hillside next to Clara, under the cottonwood tree where Grant had built the swing so many years before. And the ranch continued, passed down through the generations, a testament to what two people could build when they loved each other truly and believed, despite all odds, that both of them belonged.